Three, two, one. Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions Podcast, also streamed on Expert CRE Secrets Podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated real estate, business, cryptocurrency, defer millions in tax so you can create and preserve more wealth, or help your clients, friends, and family do the same. Hey, I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, crypto, and business minds in the world, sometimes marketing minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's originally from the great state of Rhode Island. He's out of Portugal these days, and he's the CEO at MediaOptions.com, and he has a passion for helping people to build wealth and to by buying perhaps domains, and as well as doing stuff that I'm never really touched on with our listeners. So I'm really excited to see. I don't even know how to explain it because he's prolific in what he does, but he'll be talking all about that. Please welcome to the show with me, Andrew Rosener. Andrew, how you doing?
Rosener. Great to be here, Brett. Thank you.
Absolutely. I kind of butchered that intro, but I mean, I think that kind of speaks to it, right? Could you give our listeners a little bit about your story and your focus?
Yeah,
it's something that's maybe a little bit different than people maybe are thinking about.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me one bit because, the reality is that our business, our industry is quite nascent. Our core business is domain names. I've been in the game since the late 90s, when the consumer internet sort of rolled out and became mainstream. And, the reality is I like to say that all roads lead to domain names, because it doesn't matter if you are the little pizza shop down on the corner or you are Google, your business starts with a domain name. And so there's a whole bunch of things that we could discuss around that. But, ultimately, the way that we think about it is that domain names are internet real estate. And as the internet becomes the single largest economy on the planet, the digital economy, basically encompasses everything these days. And it all starts with a domain name, right? So domain names are ultimately the bedrock foundation of the digital economy. Everything else is built up upon that, including crypto. Perfect. And we are basically the number one domain brokerage firm in the world. There are many facets to our business today, but it was built upon us being the dominant domain name brokerage firm. So we help companies to acquire the domain names that they need, and we help investors or companies sell domain names that they no longer need.
Perfect.
Some of the most.
And by the way, we're going to connect it with cryptocurrency and digital assets, right? Because part of the context today is digital assets are the future, and we're going to connect all those things. But before we go there, Drew, and I love this, I want to stop here because I want to take one other step back before we dive into all the secrets here of how to do all of those things.
We own digitalassets.com, by the way.
Oh, that's very cool. There it is. Of course you did. It's a good domain name to have for what you're doing. So, but before we go there, Andrew, you like Drew better or Andrew?
I'm fine. Anything but Andy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, Drew, Andrew, doesn't matter.
All right. So, I believe we've all been given certain gifts, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing, help to others. So, Drew, maybe go back to the time where you were younger, right? And you're just, maybe getting started in college or in high school or whatever, right? And think about that. Like, what do you feel like the one or two gifts or strengths that you were given, and how does that help how you help and bless people today?
Yeah, easy. I mean, maybe let's say there's maybe three, but I think, one is really the core tenet, which is sales. So I've been basically in sales my entire life, whether it was from selling lemonade at the lemonade stand when I was a little kid, to selling plants when I got a little bit older. Both of my parents were sort of, in various ways in the field of plants. And so I then started a software company in college with a buddy of mine. I was studying database development in college, which was really completely wrong for me, right? It was like, I literally did that because somebody told me that's the highest paying job at that time. It was like, you got to graduate from college. You're the guy that can translate between the business world and the tech guy, and create this these database systems. That guy in the middle, the translator, that was the highest paying job, the CIS guy. And so I was like, oh, sounds good, let's go. And realized quickly that wasn't for me. But even in building that business, you know, we succeeded because of my ability to sell. And so, you know, I quickly ended that. I ended up in the seafood commodity business, buying and selling, importing, exporting seafood commodities. You know, that is not a typical commodity market. There's no futures. And so it's really a transactional business. It's all about selling, right? And so I thrived in that business, very quickly 5X the company that I was working for. And when I didn't see, you know, a place to sort of, you know, for real growth, material growth beyond where I had achieved, you know, my wife and I decided to, you know, take what was then a hobby and turn it into a full-time business.
Perfect.
And
So
then, you know,
sales and building business, sales and building business. Okay. Perfect.
yep.
Got it. By the way,
I would actually say that I'm not a great business builder. So I actually don't consider myself a great business. I've built successful businesses, several of them actually, but I actually despise managing people. I despise, you know, the bureaucracy and the just administrative stuff of running a business. It's really about people and sales. That's really, I love.
communication, people, and sales. Love it. Okay, great. So now let's focus on the digital assets or the future. By the way, you can learn more about Andrew at mediaoptions.com, mediaoptions.com. So connect with us how the number one secret is the digital assets being the future, and connect that with you know, media options and domains. Help us to bring those two things together.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the best way for people to understand it is usually to give them examples. And so, you know, we helped Amazon to acquire prime.com, right? They needed, you know, in order to get people like at that time, if you go back, I guess that was probably 4 or 5 years ago, you know, at that time to go to Amazon Prime, you'd go to Amazon.com, you'd go up in the right-hand corner, click the drop-down menu. There's 45 different options. You click on Prime, you go to Prime, then you got Prime Video, Prime this, Prime. And so owning Prime.com gave them a way to, and I suggest anybody that uses Amazon Prime, instead of going to Amazon.com, because a lot of people don't know that you can just go to Prime.com and it'll take you straight to Prime, and it'll give you your variety, you know, the variety of Prime services offered by Amazon. And so, you know, we helped them to acquire that. We helped Elon Musk to acquire X.com from PayPal, which was a phenomenal story in and of itself. We've, you know, very recently, Galaxy Digital, Mike Novogratz's company, one of the largest financial intermediaries in the crypto space. We helped them to acquire Galaxy.com. I think just last week they announced that domain change, even though I think we did that deal maybe 6 or 8 months ago. They just announced that to their customers and vendors last week that, hey, we are now Galaxy.com instead of Galaxy-digital.io, which was, you know, pretty terrible domain name, particularly for a very large multi-billion-dollar financial institution. And so, you know, that's really what we do. And, you know, the reason that these companies can justify, you know, laying out hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, or in some cases, tens of millions of dollars to acquire these domain names is that at the end of the day, commerce comes down to trust. And on the internet, it makes trust much more difficult. And so trust actually gets a higher valuation in terms of, you know, sort of, let's say, the value stack of what leads up to a conversion of a customer. And so I think it's quite clear to anybody that, you know, if I'm going to buy, let's say I show up and I want to buy, I want to do an OTC $1 million domain, $1 million Bitcoin buy, right? And I'm not aware of any of the companies out there, and I Google it and I see Galaxy-digital.io, I see Coinbase.com, I see you know, Paxos, I see whoever the players are. You know, Galaxy-digital.io isn't going to instill a lot of confidence in me. And so, you know, there's just this sort of inherent initial trust. People go with their initial reaction, their initial instincts, more often than not. And so that is a very important factor in getting the click through. And the more trust you instill in that person that clicks, the higher your chances of converting that person, you know, once you get them in the door, right?
Okay.
And then
So hold
further
on,
to
pause.
that,
I want to make
there's,
sure I got it. Make sure I
yeah,
got it. Yep.
yeah,
Because I know you keep going here, and I got to pull a little bit out here. So,
yeah.
it helps to, I think, create what's called certainty of conviction for where they're going. It gives
Mhm.
clarity for where they're going. Galaxy.com versus Galaxy-something.io and all the different things. And so it helps to build that trust, even that persuasion, right before they even get to where they're going to click.
100%.
They think, hey, you're the authority, you're there. Is that a fair summary so far?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Spot
so
on.
what's number two now? What's number two? What's the number two secret to figuring out that digital assets are the future, and then applying that for entrepreneurs or business owners who are listening right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in this game a long time. And so I think let's go back in time and sort of work our way forward about the different arguments about why, what did customers say to me along the way of, no, I don't need to spend that much money and get this domain name. And then how those arguments have changed. I think that's the best way to outline it. So, basically Facebook showed up, right? And you had Absolute, I think was, Absolute Vodka, I think was the first company that did a big public marketing campaign on a Facebook page. In their campaign, they used their Facebook page and not their own domain name, okay? And so that kicked off a whole chain reaction of companies saying, wait a minute, I don't need to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to get my exact brandmatch.com domain name. I can just advertise my Facebook page. Well, then we found out quite quickly that when you entrust your brand and your relationship between your brand and your customers or your audience to a third party, such as Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any social media platform, even LinkedIn, then you are, number one, you're losing the data, right? You're not the one who's in charge of or gaining the data between that relationship. It's the third-party platform that is, and they're gaining the value. Number two, you are subject to the whims of, let's say, public consensus in the sense of, let's say, the current environment. We've got this cancel culture, and you can be simply shut off, right? Regardless of your politics, regardless of anything, you are subject to, and you might believe, look, it's not me, but these things change with time. And so, number one, you don't control your data. You don't control the relationship with that customer. That relationship can be severed at any time. And you lose that relationship and the ability to communicate with that person. Number two, you are subject to just cancellation, right? You can immediately be deplatformed, canceled, put on pause. They can make you change. Like, for example, on my Twitter account, they made me change the URL that was in my bio, in my description. They literally said, nope, sorry. And they don't even give me a reason. They just made me change it. And I had no choice, right? And so I didn't do anything wrong. It was just whatever reason, they didn't like that URL. They said, you have to change it. And there was nothing obtuse about that URL. It was literally drew.com. It was my name. It was drew.com. It was going to my sort of what is now a very antiquated bio page. And they just didn't like it.
So you lose control, you lose the opportunity to control that. Okay, got it. So then what's the action step now to apply some of this stuff, right?
So then people realize brands, that's not even really where I'm trying to go, right? So it was like, that was the first pushback, was because in the early 2000s, it was like, oh yeah, of course we need this. And then it was, oh wait, no, now we got Facebook and social media. We don't need this anymore. We're going to advertise there. And then they realized, oh wait, we messed up. For all the reasons that I just mentioned and more. And then it was, oh, now we got mobile apps. All right, I don't need this domain name because people are going to have my mobile app on their phone. And then there's so many mobile apps that you might as well just go search Google, because you're going to do the same thing trying to search through all these apps on your phone. There's, utility gets limited. There's a lot of different problems. There's a lot of security risk. There's a lot of different issues with mobile apps, which is why Google is now trying to basically kill mobile apps, right? And then, this has been sort of a pattern, right? There's just, without extrapolating this out too far, there's always these people don't want to lay out cash. And so they're always looking for a good excuse to not do it. And technology will always give you a new excuse. It'll always give you a new technology, a new platform, a new way of communicating, but there's always a cost to that, always a compromise. And so ultimately, what more and more people are realizing and this is actually going exponential because cancel culture has become such a big thing. You have to own your identity on the internet. You have to own the relationship with your customers. You have to own the data that's generated by creating, maintaining, and sustaining that relationship with that customer or your audience, even if it's not a customer.
Okay, so let's apply that now, right? So let's own the identity. So how do our listeners own the identity? Does that mean getting their first name, last name.com? Does that mean
absolutely?
Okay. Walk through that. And let's apply it to my company, right? Capital Gains Tax Solutions, right? So what would you say if you're looking at this going, all right, Brett, you're capitalgainstaxsolutions.com already. What would be the practical application? You should get your name, brettswarts.com. You should get, walk me through that assessment here.
So there's a spectrum to this, right? And there's a priority. Okay, first and foremost, brettswarts.com, you should absolutely own that. If you don't own that, I don't want to be, belligerent, but it's crazy to not own your name in this day and age, particularly if you have a public persona, particularly if what you're doing is digital, particularly if it's on the internet. You absolutely unequivocally must own your domain name.
And always .com, nothing else, or .com on the other ones.
So we're gonna get there, right? So that's sort of that's sort of the next shoe to drop that we can discuss. So preferably, just long and short of it is preferably always .com. Okay. There are other alternatives, and we can get into that. But if you can, even if it costs money. Even if it costs, quite a bit of money, if you can't afford it, if it's not going to negatively impact you, nobody wants to lay out the money, right? Nobody wants to pay the price. But if you can, and it's not going to negatively impact your cash flow, negatively impact your life, negatively impact your ability to, pay your rent, feed your family, drive your car to work, you should do that. You should lay out the money within reason and buy it. If you are a company, then you absolutely unequivocally must own your exact brand match.com. So if you're Capital Gains Tax Solutions, you need to own capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You should also own the trademark for that, right? Which will, let's say, not necessarily disable, but help prevent other people from buying similar domain names to yours that might confuse your audience and your customers, okay? In the case of Capital Gains Tax Solutions, very specifically, you have a very long name. Now, it says exactly what it should say. So I'm not saying it's a bad name. I think it's precisely what it is. It's actually a very good name because it's telling your audience exactly who you are, what you do, what they can expect from your company. And so owning that long domain string is absolutely essential, and you've done that. So congratulations. Now, there are other things to consider, such as email, right? That are maybe that gets cumbersome for people to type. Maybe because it's so long, it might lend itself to typos, right? Even yourself sending people, whether it's an employee or to yourself, I send emails to myself all day. It might be cumbersome and it might be prone to typos. And so you may consider at some point in your business cycle, as your company matures, as you become more successful, as you're looking for some, let's say, luxury investments for your business that contribute to your brand, strengthen the company's brand, strengthen your digital identity, gives you optionality. Maybe you want to go out and own something like CGTS.com, right? The acronym for Capital Gains Tax Solutions. Now, CGTS.com, that's a great 4-letter .com domain name. There's a liquid market for those domains. That is an asset. That is an asset that if in the future you ever wanted to sell, there will be a buyer for that domain name. There's a liquid floor price in the market for that domain name. And there's a more or less upper limit on the value of that domain name, right? And so that's a great asset. If you can get that for a reasonable price in my opinion, for CGTS.com would be something like, if you got that for $1,000, you hit a home run, you stole it, right? It's liquid for about that or more. If you got that for under $10,000, I think you did well. The closer you get to $2,500 to $5,000, that's what I would say is like, let's call it in the money, right? $2,500, $5,000. for a really good four-letter.com. Now, if there was a J or a Z or an X or a whatever, some random letter that's not common in that, then you could probably discount that by 50 to 75%. Okay. But considering cgts.com, these are great letters, common. They probably stand for, there's probably 500 companies in the world, at least, that have those initials, whether it's a company name, a product name, a service name. And so there's a liquid market for that domain. It's a very good domain, and it would be a great asset for your company to own. It's going to appreciate over time, and you're going to get a lot of use out of it, and also satisfaction in just knowing that, you've got Brett at cgts.com, as opposed to, telling somebody, oh, I'm Brett at Capital Gains Tax Solutions. Now, I don't even know if that's your email address. I'm not trying to, put that out into the world. I'm just making it up. But I think you understand, the point.
Yeah.
And so it gives you an easier email address, gives your customers perhaps a shorter way to get to your to you, and it gives you some optionality. So maybe there's a lot of things that you're doing. I think there are that aren't necessarily directly correlated with Capital Gains Tax Solutions, such as the podcast, right? And maybe that cgts.com gives you a little bit more flexibility, even if that's what it stands for. It's not quite as in the face to somebody that you might be working with on a matter that is not directly correlated, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's great. That's a great summary. Thank you for sharing that. So absolutely own your own name, BrettSwarts.com. By the way, if those are wondering, I already own my own name, BrettSwarts.com, right? So don't go out there and try to buy it and then try to negotiate with me, right? And number two, own your full business name, right? And then even consider number three, shortening or doing the abbreviations of your business name. Is that a fair summary so far, Drew?
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's the next step? Okay, so you say, okay, bro, let's get a little more advanced. You've already owned both, okay, and now you want to be even a little more strategic. What do you do as a business owner, a real estate company, a real estate broker, cryptocurrency expert? Like, what is it that you're going to try to next level niche down?
So interestingly, real estate companies, particularly larger ones, and real estate brokers have traditionally been really early adopters in this stuff. They actually have understood, because of the value of the transactions that they've got and the importance of trust and the importance of, and the competition in the market, owning a really good domain name that's been one of the strongest markets. So back in the 90s, we were already seeing 6-figure sales of things like NewYorkRealEstate.com or OrlandoRealEstate.com or things of that nature, sort of some geo-specific, city, state, town, followed by realestate.com or property.com. And that is a really authoritative domain name. So actually the real estate industry has been very good about adopting domain names as a marketing tool and as a branding tool, and as creating a competitive edge against, you can be, Bob's, real estate, and that has some degree of trust and strength, but it doesn't tell me much. But if you're, Orlando Real Estate, and I'm looking for real estate in Orlando, there's a really high degree of trust and inclination that you are going to be able to satisfy my needs, right? Beyond that, I think that, you briefly touched on, alternative domain extensions, right? And so in today's world, there are, I think, something like 1,200 different domain extensions, everything from .real estate to .horse. And so, I think that those have a place. And I think that if you cannot get your exactbrandmatch.com domain name, then you have no choice but to look at some of these alternatives. And so I think something, we call it like a hack. And so like, I don't know, I know that there's a .tax. I don't know if there's a .solutions, but, you could own capitalgains.tax, right? And that's a great brand. Now, it is going to cause some confusion because trillions of dollars have been spent in branding, marketing, and advertising to ingrain the .com into consumers' brains. And so first instinct, we like to call it the 60-mile-an-hour test. You're driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour, you see a billboard, Capital Gains Tax Solutions. If I see capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, I'm probably going to remember that. If I see capitalgains.tax, I'm probably going to get home 30 minutes later, go to my computer, and I'm going to type in capitalgainstax.com. as opposed to capitalgains.tax, just because I'm trying to recollect and there's that thing in my brain that just puts .com on the end of it, right? And so even myself in conversations, I'll be talking about an alternative domain extension, and I might say capitalgains.tax.com. And just instinctually, that's what comes out of my mouth. And so, there is confusion that's going to be created by that, particularly in email, depending on the type of business you're in. If you're in finance, if you're in, anything with sensitive customer data, you got to be very careful, because somebody sends an email to capitalgainstax.com and you are Capital Gain, you're Brett at capitalgains.tax. Well, that customer data may be going somewhere that you don't want it to, right? If you're in the field of medical, if you're in the medical field or the health field, and you're getting, sensitive customer health information, well, then you've got, HIPAA violations potentially by being aware of that hole in your data security that you're not addressing. And so, there are a lot of considerations, but there are a lot of alternatives. And so, I think that depending on who you are, .org can be a very strong thing. The other thing to think about, again, coming into that sort of luxury investments in your brand, you've got your exactbrandmatch.com, maybe you've gotten that shortening, you've shortened it to an acronym or something, or you've cut off a prefix, cut off a suffix. Well, now maybe you want to get some generic domain names that are very specific to the product or the service that you sell, that you offer, right? And so, you have, I don't remember the name of the company offhand, but there's a very large company in the real estate field that, they went out and they bought property.com, they got realestate.com, they got homes.com, right? And those are really powerful domains. They instill trust and create this funnel, of natural traffic, marketability. It gives you such a competitive advantage, against anybody, right? Because there's only one person can own those domains.
Awesome, Drew. You could go on and do a dissertation on this. This is so amazing. That's part of why you're probably the best in the world. What you do. By the way, you can find more about Andrew Rosener, and I probably butchered that last name again, at mediaoptions.com. That's mediaoptions.com. Your last name is interesting, right? It's kind of a different pronunciation, which I imagine, I don't know, your whole life.
Yeah, originally
mispronounced it, and now this is part of why your brain has been like, you 100%. See, this is why all these words matter. Is that a fair summary, Drew?
Absolutely, that's 100% true. Yeah.
All right, so let's go to the lightning. Actually, before we go to the lightning round, I do want to connect one dot here, because when people read this, digital assets are the future, they might be thinking crypto, right? And I was thinking crypto too, and help us connect those dots. How is crypto connected to what you're doing, if any at all?
Well, I started this conversation saying all roads lead to domain names, right? And so that stands true for crypto. One of my clients back in 2011 was one of the early Bitcoin developers. And, he told me about Bitcoin. That led me down, into investing in Bitcoin very early. I was very fortunate in that regard. Back, when Bitcoin broke above $1,000, we went even deeper. I participated in numerous amounts of, ICOs, and I can't even begin to tell you, how in depth we've gone. I was also, probably one of the largest owners of Bored Apes from the Bored Ape Yacht Club in the NFT space, and so, and we've launched, several companies. So I am the co-founder of Ape Productions, which was an NFT project. We partnered with Timbaland, the Grammy Award-winning producer, and we launched Ape Productions, which was basically a Web3 music label in order to, basically take these NFTs, bring them to life as characters, and produce music behind them, where you don't need to know actually who the artist is. You see this ape, right, is this hip hop artist. And anyway, so, I don't want to go too far into the weeds on all of that, but again, all of this came about as a result of domain names. And so domain names are the original digital asset, and everything else is sort of building upon that. I did an amazing conversation about this specific this question, just so you can gain some understanding of how deep the answer to your question is. I did a 3-hour interview with Michael Saylor back before anybody who knew who Michael Saylor was. CEO of MicroStrategy, publicly traded company, largest owner of Bitcoin in the world, I believe. And Nowadays, everybody in the crypto space, particularly in Bitcoin, knows who Michael Saylor is, and they worship him like God. And what they don't know is that his story begins with domain names as well. His digital asset story begins with domain names. And so,
Hold on, I'm thinking like the Lord of the Rings, right? You're like, how did it all start? You're like, well, there was this hobbit at this little town, and this little hobbit was this domain.com names, and these were digital assets, and this is before this thing called cryptocurrency came along. So I think that's what I'm hearing. Like that, it's almost like the domain names in a way was kind of the foundation for cryptocurrency. Is that fair?
It's not even a question. It's an absolute fact. You can go on the A16Z, what is it called, Future podcast. We sold them Future.com actually for that podcast. But Chris Dixon, one of the founders of A16Z, one of the managing partners, he did a podcast recently. He's done many over the years discussing domain names. But in one of his recent podcasts, where it was literally Mark Andreessen and Chris Dixon, two of the absolute smartest and most successful people in the entire world of venture capital investing, they literally geeked out and started talking about domain names and how domain names are the original digital asset and everything else stem from that. This in and of itself literally can be a multi-hour conversation. But to bring it all together, domain names were the first way that somebody could, let's say, make a directional bet on the growth of the internet. To say, there's this new thing called the internet, and I believe it's going to be huge, because that's what I believe. I sat in a classroom and my professor told me, I was learning basic HTML, and he told me that if I put up this little one-page website, somebody in China can see it. They can go, they can read it, and at that time there wasn't any interaction, but I could put up information on the internet and somebody in China could read it. And that blew my mind. And I wanted to be a part of that. And the only way, you can't own a piece of TCP IP, which is the protocol, right? The data protocol. You can't own a piece of HTML. You can't own any of these web protocols that have made the internet what it is today. So the only way to make a directional bet and own a piece of that internet was to own the domain names on which all of it would be built. And what I can tell you, as somebody who was early in domain names, early in crypto, early in NFTs, early in basically every single digital wave that has happened over the last 25 years, I can tell you that unequivocally, domain names, like I was an early investor in Amazon, I was an early investor in Apple, I was an early investor in a lot of big tech companies that we all look at, and we look at the memes of like, whoa, look at that hockey stick growth. None of that. I don't care if you're talking about Bitcoin, shitcoin, doesn't matter, Amazon, Apple, none of it compares to an early investment in a domain name. If you invested in a good one-word, two-letter, three-letter .com domain name, you went from an initial investment of $200 originally it was free, and then it was $200 for 2 years. And then the price, just started coming down from there. Once GoDaddy sort of arrived on the scene, and the monopoly of network solutions was eliminated, then it was $8.99 per year, and you could own an asset. We own, let's say, clear.com is one of the domain names that we own. There are about 30 companies. I think there's 5 or 6, which are $1 billion plus company, that would love to own the clear.com domain name. That domain, in my estimation, is worth around $25 million. That domain cost me $9 a year to keep. Now, if you're a real estate guy, if you have a $25 million home, how much is that home going to cost you to keep? Just to keep on your balance sheet?
Probably at least $2 million a year. I mean, I imagine with the upkeep, property taxes, insurance, all that stuff.
100%. Property tax, insurance, broken pipes, maintenance, paint,
landscaping,
yada, yada, yada. Right. Yeah. So, you're probably right. It's probably, something around $1 million to $1.5 million, maybe $2 million a year just to keep that house at status quo. Right. Now, hopefully you can generate more income on it than your costs, but it's time consuming and capital intensive. I got a $25 million asset that isn't as liquid as the piece of physical real estate, but over a 25-year period of time, we went from $200 or $100 a year to $25 million, right? There is no other asset.
To this question, I think it's the most
of.
important question. Are you ready? So your basis is $200, whatever it is, and your gain is about $25 million. Okay.
Story of my life, man.
What's the biggest frustration, Drew, when you go to exit highly appreciated domains or cryptocurrency or other things, and you have to pay
capital gains, baby?
Yeah. So what if there were a way to defer capital gains tax on the sale of just about anything? In fact, we just did a Bitcoin case, for example. She worked for Google. She bought Bitcoin early adoption, about $50,000. It went to $50 million. Okay. And she calls and she says, Brett, I've never sold. And here's why. A, I didn't have a great place to put the money. I still believe in the long-term future of Bitcoin. Number two, I have huge capital gains tax. It's somewhere around 37%. I live in California. It's millions of dollars. And I said, look, well, there's a way you can defer when you exit the $5 million up to about $1.85 million in her particular deal. Now at $54,000 a coin, that's when she hit $50 million. And so what was interesting is we helped her defer. She did the deal. She's totally happy. She was able to use the funds to invest into a startup company, all tax deferred, kind of like a self-directed IRA. Really cool. And I called her though at $55,000 a coin. I was like, hey, well, you kind of just made your money back. You're back to where you're at before. Do you want to exit more? She's like, well, we want to take this slow. It went to $60,000 a coin, right? It went to $65,000 a coin, and I just kind of kept, little pokes. She said, I'm still holding on. I go, well, what if Bitcoin were to drop, and what if you could buy back in at a lower price, all tax deferred? Would you be interested? She goes, I would be. Let's talk about that in the new year. And now the rest is kind of history. She didn't exit and things went down to 20, below 20. But what if there were a way to sell and defer and buy back all tax deferred? Would that be of interest to you, Drew?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Well, there is. It's called the Deferred Sales Trust, by the way. Anyone who wants to learn about that can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Wasn't planning on plugging that, but this is interesting that Drew brought that up in that sense. So, capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can learn more about that. Keep going, Drew. What are your thoughts on that?
No, directly applicable. I mean, everybody in my industry, in fact, would be highly interested in learning about that, starting with me. But yeah, this is a problem. I mean, most of my friends in the industry, right? These are OGs. They've been in this game for, let's say 10 to 25 years. And their base is extremely low. I mean, even if you're buying these domains in the aftermarket, I still buy domain names almost every single day. I still buy Bitcoin almost every single week. But the difference is if I sell a domain name, I can't replace it, right? We have this phrase that we've sort of, trademarked, off the market forever, right? Because the reality is these domains are like snowflakes, that each one is a one of one. You cannot replace it. And that's actually what's driving the value, right? Whereas the Bitcoin is fungible. If I sell one Bitcoin, I don't need to get that Bitcoin back. I just need to buy a Bitcoin back, right? And so
right, you can't 1031 exchange a domain, right? And you can't 1031 exchange.
You used to be able to.
Right, before they limited, right? To just that's fascinating. I didn't even realize you could ever do that. Yeah, because I know you can use 1031 exchange businesses. And for those who don't know what the 1031 exchange is, you should, because you listen to this podcast all the time. It's a way to defer capital gains tax on the sale of investment real estate for like-kind investment real estate. The challenge with that is it has 45 days to identify, 180 days to close. It often causes people to overpay for properties, especially in a cap rate environment that's very low. But also doesn't work for primary homes, doesn't work for businesses, doesn't work for crypto, doesn't work for domain names anymore. And they used to be able to work for like helicopters and different things, and it doesn't work for any of that. But the Deferred Sales Trust does. It works for anything. It works for NFTs. It works for businesses. We've done it in Ethereum. We've done Bitcoin. We're working on a big NFT deal right now for Omi. And the client of mine, he's not a client yet, but he has about 150 million of it. It went to 300 million at one point. And I met him in Las Vegas for a real estate conference. He's like, Brett, I was an early adopter to this. In fact, I was a part of the initial team to roll this out. He was mostly in sales too. And he was like kind of the promoter educator of the NFT. And it went to 300 million at one point, and then it dropped to 150 million. I think it's down right now. But the whole vision is, Brett, if I can get out tax deferred and then use the funds to invest into real estate, it's kind of like 1031 in my crypto. Right, I can get it into tangible assets that give cash flow. In other words, I can build the wealth by hitting a home run, but then I can preserve it by keeping it tax deferred. And
Mhm.
so that's what we're doing for him right now. It's a pretty cool thing. But hey, Drew, we're running out of time, so we're actually double our time right now. We're going to bring you back for sure because I think this conversation deserves even more in-depth conversation here. So, Drew, if people want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, mediaoptions.com. We are the #1 domain brokerage firm in the world. I am active on Twitter at twitter.com/Andrew Rosener. And those are probably the two best places to find me.
Amazing. Hey, Drew, thanks for being on the show. I want to encourage you to keep using your gift of sales and communication and helping people to Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't tie the knot on that last section. So we were saying, domain names was a great way to express your investment view on the growth of the internet, right? But because you couldn't own a piece of the protocols. Right. And with crypto, it's the opposite, right? You can actually own a piece of the protocols. And so that was sort of the segue for me. That was why it was so obvious, and for a lot of other people as well. You have these tremendously powerful new protocols that are seeing the same type of hockey stick growth as the internet did, but you can now own the protocol. Whereas, on the internet, you could only own
get a piece of the action. Get investing and look at crypto. It is the future, and is the digital assets future as a part of domains. Thank you so much, Drew, for closing that loop. And I keep using the gifts of talents of sales and communication and helping people create and preserve more wealth with their digital assets. And I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. Also stream on expert CRE secrets, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust is an amazing way for you to create and preserve more wealth as you're exiting your highly appreciated business, primary home, real estate, cryptocurrency, now domain names. I've never done a domain name deal, but I'm hoping to do one here soon with Drew. But you should know about this, and you can know about it by going to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com and check out the new book that's coming out with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. He'll be in the book, and a couple other people. It's called Building a Tax Deferred Exit Strategy. And we appreciate everyone out there. Please rate, review, subscribe. Thank you for listening for this long. This is one of our longest interviews, but it deserved it because Drew had so much wisdom for us. Look for Drew to come back